Hello, good morning and welcome to this latest Bristol Live Business Surgery, this time with interaction and special guests from Bristol Creative Industries and Knight Frank. I hope this finds you well. We all feel so much better when the sun's shining, I guess, and our spirits are lifted. Who knows quite what the day will bring, let alone what the next 6 months will bring. There's obviously the announcement from government later today, but today we will be exploring some of the trends in property, commercial property in Bristol, and also trying to project what might be happening, what to look out for. We'll be speaking with it's a sort of all-star panel really, with Interactions Director Hayley Blacker, Chris Thurling, the Chair of Bristol Creative Industries and Armadillo, and Andy Smith, Partner at Knight Frank. And you can see from both the creative industry sector, we want to know more about how tech, creative, cultural businesses and so on are operating in these times, what workplace and opportunities they may wish going forwards. And then from the commercial property side with Andy at Knight Frank, what are the trends? What's happening with leases? What's happening with commitment levels to new business and so on? Please send your questions and thoughts using the Q&A button below, and you can ask anonymously, of course, be named if you like, and we will ask those questions during this session. Note, as ever, it's being recorded and be on our Bristol Live YouTube channel later this afternoon. A couple of updates from us. First up, we will be continuing to run these Bristol Live business surgeries virtually going forwards, regardless of what happens. They are specially created deep dive sessions showcasing companies' expertise through discussion. So talk to us if you wish to be involved, because we can all do with advice and new business. And we think they have sort of enduring value. The numbers on our YouTube channel are actually really interesting, people going for information and advice from these business surgeries going forwards. Bristol Life Awards news. We will be making, by the way, on both our awards, the Bristol Life Awards and Bristol Property Awards, making an announcement in the coming days about ticketing plans for the autumn. Bristol Life Awards will be held on the 16th of September at Ashton Gate, and we've got a great roster of sponsors for the awards, led by Marsh Commercial and numerous companies involved with that. If you're an ambitious company or one seeking to rebuild your business pipeline, or plain proud to be a leading Bristol company, or simply with September being the point at which so many business events and business marketing kicks in, please do consider sponsoring the event. 17 sponsors currently, and everyone coming together from the coolest of the indies to the largest of the companies. It's just the best celebration of business in Bristol. Property Awards are back in real life on 12th of November at Ashton Gate. Multiple months of marketing culminates in a lunchtime and afternoon event, and it's just the biggest gathering of property and pro services companies since those pre-lapsarian days of 2019, whenever that was. If you missed the launch event last week, it's also on our YouTube channel as well. Nominations are open, and yeah, there are a few, not many now, sponsorships available. Terrific support. There's one more event I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, which is EntreConf. Have a look at this. Entrepreneurs are central to this city. New ways of looking at the world, new business models, new services, products, new opportunities for advisors, investors, financial companies, lawyers, academic institutions, marketing agencies, so much more. This is why we've launched EntreConf, the Entrepreneurs Conference. The future is unwritten. Virtual this year on July 1st, it's pitched at startups, scale-ups, some may even be the futurecorns, the big breakout value players in years to come. It'll give, we hope, profound insight, valuable inspiration, catalyze partnerships, connecting everyone together in the value chain, and celebrate the special contribution. Please do talk to our teams about the remaining options to be involved. Note, by the way, that one of our speakers today, Bristol Creative Industries, is an associate of EntreConf, and thank you for that. It's pitched at all forms of businesses, startups, and especially scale-ups, and all connected with entrepreneurs. And frankly, there's a lot of great business advice in this. We're all trying to navigate these times, and new business thinking is valuable. Look at these keynotes that's been flashing up as I've been talking. They're absolutely stellar. Chris Anderson, owner of the world-renowned TED conferences, talking about the wisdom from dozens of inspirational entrepreneurs he's known, plus his own remarkable entrepreneurial story. And Hyatt, unrivaled top-level first-hand experience as a former business partner of Jeff Bezos at Amazon and chief of staff at Google. And we'll be talking about business strategies. And by the way, she's also a non-exec of Armadillo, Chris Thurling's commercial business. And our thanks to him for helping get Anne on board. Del Vince, leading green energy entrepreneur and pioneer, created Ecotricity and eco-friendly forest green rovers, eco-values and the wooden stadium for the players and fans' diets. Portfolio Green Companies is also the exec producer of Seaspiracy. And he was just on the news last night talking about the pernicious effects of gambling in a football environment. There'll be exclusive research, the reveal of EntreLeague, the leading 30 entrepreneurial companies chosen by experts, practical advice for startups, much, much more. Join us on July 1st. Free conference passes are available via the site, courtesy of our sponsors. And yeah, the future is unwritten. It's up to us to do it. Bristol Life, at the heart of all we do, of course, is Bristol Life, and we're really proud to publish a magazine that celebrates the best of this incredible city. We're here to celebrate the good stuff, and thank you for your support. Okay, let's do this. Let's bring forward, well, first of all, we'll be hearing shortly from Chris Thurling, the chair of Bristol Creative Industries and customer relationship marketing specialist Armadillo. Then we'll also be hearing from Andy Smith, partner at the UK's leading independent estate agent, Knight Frank. But let's start with Hayley Blacker. Well, Hayley, director at Interaction, and will be joining us. No, there you are. Hello. How are you this morning?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Well, you've recently, it sounds somewhat implausible this to me, but you've recently celebrated your 25th year within Interaction, and congrats. How has Interaction been in these times?
Yeah, we've been fine. I suppose to kind of, talk about the pandemic side of things, we've done a fair bit, but to kind of, I suppose, set the scene a bit, we've since September, things have become increasingly busier and busier because confidence is coming back and continues to progress. People continuing now to see the value in the office. We're far from the office is dead. We know that. But I suppose it's been really interesting in recent months, the amount of businesses that have got decisions to make about their property are kind of in that should I stay or should I go, and are starting to look around for new premises, but they're just not confident about how the hybrid working is going to affect the shape of their space. How many days are people going to be in, how many are going to be coming to the office on what particular days, which days are going to be popular, and therefore this is resulting into, more importantly, how big their office space needs to be. People are kind of now looking for more confidence in their decisions on properties. So we've seen a big increase in this type of work. And I suppose, sorry.
No, you go.
I was going to say, the other big thing I think we're seeing, which is great for our type of business, is that flight for quality across many aspects of property. But in terms of interiors, it's helping people provide something that works on so many levels now. It's great, it's got to be functional, it's got to look great, it's got to support well-being, it's got to be productive, it's got to be good for different levels of tasks to ensure that people can do everything they need to do when they come in, so that people want to come back again. So it's actually a really exciting time.
It's an exciting time, and it's it's a great time to be an interpreter of what's happening, because it is so puzzling for many businesses. Your clash at some reference, should I stay or should I go? I'm sure it's exactly as part of the rhythm that people are going through, and we'll talk more about that with Andy at Knight Frank about how people are making decisions. But just to come back to Interaction, what sorts of projects have you been working on? What types of new businesses either have you been picking up or pitching?
So it's a huge variance, I have to say. It's businesses that are looking to create, that it's generally ones that have something that's given them a reason to do something. So either there's a lease break or a lease end. So, and because of that, they are really, really now saying before they might have said, do you know what, let's just stick around for another, the rest of our 5-year lease. But they're really questioning what this now means for them. So we have so many people coming to us in terms of understanding what they need to do, how they need to do it. But to be honest, they've got to get their heads around it themselves as well. We're guiding them through lots of surveys. We're working with them to kind of really understand what they need to do. But there's a lot of time that still needs to pass, really, because they're at that beginning phase. I think even everyone's watching what other people are doing. Facebook last week only just kind of launched that they were going to ask all of their employees what they wanted to do. So people are still at that kind of pinnacle moment where they're really trying to get their heads around it. And then, yeah, creating these destination workplaces. So even if they're not moving, they know they have to do something differently to attract people back in. The desk occupancy isn't going to be any more than what it was pre-pandemic. It's going to be less, but we're switching out lots of things for collaborative areas, places to make the office a great productive place to be. You're not going to come in now to sit at your desk and do Excel spreadsheets. You're going to come in for meeting with your team meetings, collaborative moments, and people wanting us to help them shape their space to suit that.
And we'll come on to also the specific co-working points, and of course how co-working thinking is affected much of business workplace thinking. But just to check that point, it's a sense check. What trends are you seeing? You're saying about offices as destination. Has there been an acceleration in companies wanting cooler, better premises, places that people want to go to rather than have to go to?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about cooler or better place in terms of the trendy side of it. It has to be really productive. So, but in terms of it has to attract people in. So that people are. There's no acceptance anymore of boring offices. I think if you can be at home, you can have the comforts of your home, but actually also people, there's the many surveys that we've been doing and others have been doing, home working fatigue has really started to set in now. And I think that people wanting 5 days from home goes down to 4 days, down to 3 days. And I think other people that have carried out similar surveys were back down to probably 1.5 to 2 days. So there is this opportunity that businesses are grabbing to get people back into their workplace, but they've really got to come in for something special. So yes, cool, but more homely, things that can bring them in, things that the businesses can offer them, great workplace settings, great breakout areas, just something that really fits for their team.
With our focus today on co-working, particularly in this session, what has changed for that co-working environment since the pandemic?
I think so much has changed for them. I mean, the demand, I suppose the demand for co-working has been on a major roller coaster since the pandemic began, for many businesses, I suppose, coming out of their leases pretty quickly in the beginning, and they're probably being in a very difficult time because they could make some very instant kind of huge savings. So it was a tough place to be, but the rising companies kind of wanting these spaces now, because from what we've been saying before, where you've got the companies uncertain, there's about how much space they want. And I'm sure Andy will talk about this later. We're seeing a huge rise in the amount of businesses that are taking co-working spaces just to kind of see how it goes, give them that flexibility rather than signing up to a 5-year lease. And predominantly you would have seen co-working would have been kind of startup businesses, growth businesses, suited to that kind of unpredictability of growth. But then to give them the culture and the community that they wanted to give their business the opportunity to develop. But now it's not about those smaller growth businesses that are considering co-working. It's not about the space to grow, it's about the flexibility. It's not about the community or the culture because they want their own space to bring that. It's generally there's a huge drive in bigger businesses taking co-working spaces.
Put it another way around, are we all .coms now? It's the triumph for those sort of millennial businesses, and the new way of working, which felt extremely radical then, has continued to become mainstream and accelerated by the pandemic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if you kind of thought who was going into a co-working space, you would think tech, growth, startup, but it's, we've got large legal firms considering it, recruitment companies. But I suppose then what the co-working companies are now having to do is there's still that flight for quality. It has to be a really good destination office. So if they can get that right, they've got a great opportunity now, whilst these companies are kind of passing through as they kind of see how how their workplace is going to evolve and how people are going to use it, and a bit of a test phase.
Yeah, and it's a question also for Andy in a bit, but do you think it's enough real estate given this continued growth in co-working? Are there enough sites available in Bristol currently to match potential demand?
I think there's a huge opportunity. I mean, Bristol and Bath anyway have a huge growth in tech cluster, and that continues to grow. I think as there's so many businesses that will be considering Bristol and Bath as a place to now relocate their business to. We know that many businesses will migrate from out of London. The talent pool is always been good around this area. So I think the demand will just increase and increase. So no, I don't think there is probably enough, and there's great opportunity. But it's also the opportunity to do something different now, because the co-working has changed of what companies want from it. So that's the key, I think.
Yeah, let's actually bring in Chris and Andy to screen at this point. And we'll come back to that point about availability and perhaps the open-mindedness of freeholders to consider different usages of their buildings. If I just begin with Chris. Good morning to you both, by the way. Hello, and thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Morning.
Morning.
So let's start with you and the tech and creative sector. Importance of that to Bristol. It's Bristol Creative Industries type of world. How significant is it? And easy question, what's the prognosis? Do you expect that to continue to rise in the coming quarters and years?
Well, I mean, the creative industries and the sort of digital sector, I think, has been identified as probably one of the cornerstones of the economy here, along with advanced engineering and professional services. That's according to the government's industrial strategy. So, yeah, it's a hugely important sector, high growth, lots of well-paid jobs, not necessarily that many employers that, the average person would have heard of, with the exception of the BBC and Arden Animations. It's definitely a small business economy on the whole. And the prognosis going forward is, I mean, I don't have any data on it. I mean, that's one of the things that we perhaps sometimes struggle with, is it's a hard sector to kind of get good data on because of all the reasons I've just described. But anecdotally, it's growing. And I mean, Bristol Creative Industries has a jobs board, for example, which is I think a pretty good bellwether for how things are going. We've currently got, and that's been going about 15 years. We've currently got a record number of jobs on that website, over 150 jobs, I think, currently being advertised on our site alone. So if that's any indication of the health of the sector, then I think things look pretty good at the moment.
And is it the nature of the companies, and without making it too much of a cliche, that smaller based companies with growth potential absolutely require more flexible space, maybe particularly for project-based work, but more generally for growth prospects?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when you're a scaling business, that's locking yourself into a long-term lease with a fixed amount of space is a really difficult thing to do. And I think I've said this for quite some time. I personally feel we have a kind of analog commercial property market for a digital age still, that even though there are co-working spaces, more products coming onto the market than there were, say, 5-10 years ago, I still think that as a consumer, if you like, someone that wants to buy these products, the choice is pretty pathetic still, I think.
No, say what you really think. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I'll say what I think. No, I mean, it's something I've obviously been and tried to get office space lots of times over the years. Someone that's run businesses and been hugely disappointed with the market. I think it's terrible.
Andy, you will. I mean, not that you should feel the need to respond, but on behalf of the whole community. I'll bring you in a moment on this terrible landscape with lack of opportunity and whatever. But Chris, I mean, your business was previously based in Bath, and you've experienced, give or take, much the same thing. That's one of the reasons why you went to Bristol, presumably.
Well, yeah. I mean, Bath is really, the city council in Bath thinks of Bath as a tourist destination on the whole, and historically has, in my view, again, hasn't done a great deal to help other businesses there. And obviously it's a city of 90,000 people compared to Bristol of 400,000. Bristol's probably historically more of a commercial city than Bath. So yeah, partly that was the reason, was there was more opportunity to find the kind of space we needed in Bristol. And also, you know, in terms of where our workforce was located, it was tended to be, you know, more in Bristol than Bath, just because of the cost of accommodation and so on for young people in Bath is difficult.
So we started with the macro about the potential for the overall sector growth, importance to Bristol. We've come to the sort of midterm point, which is about the need for perhaps shorter leases, less onerous covenants, greater flexibility. But come to the actual environment point. Talk to us about how tech and creative companies view workplace needs. Is it all typically uber cool? Hayley's point earlier, of course, functionality matters, and ultimately these are all businesses and they need to operate successfully as businesses, but they tend to be cooler in terms of their office and workplace needs.
Yeah, but I think I take Hayley's point that, you know, that's a nice, great if you can find it, but I'd say there are probably other factors that come up slightly higher up the list than cool, whatever you define cool as. I mean, cost, obviously, you know, these are businesses that haven't got money to chuck around and aren't necessarily going to spend, you know, over the top just to get some kind of definition of cool. But I also think, you know, and this is again where I think the planners have got it badly wrong over the years, is, from my perspective anyway, is the kind of the hinterland in which you're operating. Creative people don't want to be in some kind of sterile business park. They want to be able to go out at lunchtime and go to shopping, go to interesting places. And, you know, if you look at the, you know, historically, where are the places in the country that have nurtured and thrived creative businesses, they've been, you know, Soho in London, now Shoreditch, places like that, where it's a sort of mixed environment. And I think it's not just the, you know, if the office is cool but in the middle of a business park on the north fringe of the city, I don't think that's going to compensate people enough for the fact that, you know, the hinterland around them is so sterile.
Inherently social beasts, perhaps, and
yeah.
If you're in the business of interpreting societal trends to give it a very pompous context, then you need to be within the society. You know, up to a point.
Yeah, creative. You know, being in a creative industry, you need. I mean, if you look at the BBC, is it a coincidence the BBC's not next door virtually to the Royal West of England Academy? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, or right near the university. You know, there's all that kind of vibrancy of a place. And yeah, I'm always really disappointed when I see these kind of developments, which are just, you know, office buildings plonked down in the middle of, you know, if you look at the stuff that's being built, say next door to Temple Meads, some of the stuff that's being built there at the moment, it's just boring, depressing, unimaginative. And yeah, it might attract certain kind of businesses, but not the kind of businesses that I work with.
So at this point, I'm going to bring Andy in, and please obviously join any of you for any of this discussion. So Andy, we've got boring, depressing, unimaginative, terrible. There's this litany of terms. I know you're not the representative of the whole sector, but to take the underlying point that this is a growth area. It's a sort of micro business type of area. It's great need for flexibility and so on. How do you think the demand for that type of sector or that type of company is reflected in the offering of Bristol in terms of commercial premises?
Well, where to start, I suppose. Yeah, Chris, totally take on board your points. You know, historically, the property industry has been very slow moving. It is, you know, the majority of the offices are held in pension funds. Pension funds just seek returns. They are very slow, boring, very risk averse. And so that's always been the sort of the blueprint, as it were. I think property being a slow industry, it takes a long time for the wheels to turn and things to start to change. But I do genuinely think that is starting to happen. a lot of landlords, picking up on the co-working point that you were talking about previously, are now actually starting to look at providing within their space their own fitted opportunity. So that they will fit a space much like a co-worker would do as a percentage of their building to offer that flexibility to those companies that need to move quickly. And then other things, I know you touched on Temple Meads, Chris. I'd welcome the chance to show you around a scheme which has just finished there, which is called the Distillery, where 6-7 years ago, Royal London were asking us, what are the trends? What is going to happen? And we were saying, well, Bristol's the second largest tech hub outside of London, and what can't tech occupiers get? They can't get really good quality space at the size they need, because quite often, your new grade A space is 20,000 feet. Well, that's 250 people. Whereas your newer businesses are going to be 30, 40, 50 people. So that scheme was developed out and is uber cool, to take your turn of phrase, but it is being specifically designed for that. I do take on board, it's pretty much the only option out there in terms of a new build, but quite a lot of the refurbished product that's coming through is also trying to address that a little bit. Just picking up a couple of the other points, I think Hayley touched on it. There is this real drive to sort of downsize and up spec. So we are starting to see that come into the market, and so this sort of quality of product, is coming through as well. But it is all about giving your employees the incentive to invest their time in the commute, and sort of decide to come into space. So it's coming, but it's coming very slowly, probably slower than you'd want, which is great for the co-workers, because they can then fill that gap. What they offer that generally historically standard landlords haven't offered is that level of service and attention over and above what a landlord will normally give you. You're looked after from the minute that you come in. A light bulb goes, it's not your job, it's somebody else's job. It's little things like that you get from the co-working sector that you just wouldn't get on a standard lease.
It's essentially, in some ways, closer to a hospitality world or concierge approach to space management than a traditional infrastructure. Yes, you get someone in to repair something which has gone wrong approach, which has been historical landlords from the beginning. So tell us, and back to you, Hayley, about co-working hubs. So in many ways the ultimate in flexibility. What's your take about the potential, given what we've heard about particularly from tech and creative need and perhaps the lack of available stock currently? Would you expect the sector to have the continuing growth that it has in recent times, running broadly at similar levels, likely to accelerate or drop off? Where do you place it?
I do believe the demand won't drop off, if not, continue to grow. I think, but they have to grow with the right space. I think what will also, I think there'll be an offering from some co-working companies where some businesses will choose, like Andy said, to go for much smaller spaces. So therefore, they will rely on some of these co-working spaces to also provide them with those larger event kind of team spaces that they have then kind of ended up removing from their office space to just, to downsize. So we're seeing, I think we'll see kind of more of that to come. There's an American company, I think starting out in London called Convene, who are going to provide something from your single desk through to being able to provide event space for up to 200 people. So these larger businesses that have normally provided that within their bigger spaces and these big legal corporates, I think we'll also see a shift to using those spaces as well. So there's lots of different elements of how they can continue to support the change in the property landscape. As people's leases come to an end, will they dip in, dip out, grow? Tech companies will continue to kind of come through. See, I can't see it tailing off.
I mean, just on a, where we are getting requirements in from the co-working guys all the time. So co-working in Bristol, there's about 500,000 square feet of co-working in Bristol, which is sort of 5.5% of the market, which is miles behind Manchester, Birmingham, London, obviously. And so we reckon there's about 250,000 square foot worth of requirements, live requirements from operators, either who are already here, but there's also a number of the London operators trying to get into the Bristol market because it is, notionally undersupplied. So yeah, I do think that will continue to sort of feed through. And it's quite interesting. You talk about whether the tech market is going to continue to grow. Pre the pandemic, it was the biggest sector for take-up of office space in the city. It had just overtaken professional services. During the pandemic, it's literally fallen through the floor because everybody's gone back to working from home. But it's quite the guys who are showing around space now. It's primarily the creative tech sector who are responding most rapidly to coming back out and getting back out and seeing office spaces.
So just to play that back, there was the propulsive growth of tech and the reputation and the cluster theory approach of tech in Bristol over some years. And of course, BCI has played its big part in promoting that. That sort of tapered because those sorts of businesses were probably better able, culturally as well as technically, to adapt to working from home. But that's beginning to unwind, and you're now seeing the demand and interest coming back. Is that where we are?
Yeah, there's a company that we've done work for. I probably shouldn't mention who they are, but they went from, I think there were 4 of them, sort of 5-6 years ago, and now they're a sort of a tech unicorn, and you could probably work it out from that. But their biggest department is the recruitment department, and because they're trying to get people in. And so if you're trying to recruit somebody, what are they coming to if everybody's working at home? Your company culture is built by being in the office, and therefore being in the office is the only way that you're going to create that culture. So if you don't have an office, and you can see that with all the larger, Facebook and Google said right at the start of the pandemic, they said nobody's coming back into the office, and surprise, surprise, they've all started to take more space and get people to come back in. So I think the office will still have that place, and probably more so for a lot of the creative industries where it's actually being with your colleagues and your workmates, where you get the ideas that you're just not going to get on a half-hour Zoom call here and there.
So look, Chris, take both those points. One, recruitment, and particularly for fast growth businesses, recruiting to what, where, and how that affects culture. And 2, the inherently collaborative nature of the sector. We all need to be together for at least some of the time. You agree with both of those?
I don't know. I mean, I think there are examples out there in the world of businesses that are 100% virtual, that have been going for 10 years or more. They're mainly in the tech space, that have very strong cultures. I think there's a business called Substack or something like that employs about 1,000 people. And I think we're all starting to learn that, that maybe you can create a culture online completely. I mean, I'm not personally convinced that is possible, but I think maybe for some kinds of businesses, it could be possible. I think, I still think there's certainly a feeling amongst the business. I have a business which is about 60 people, creative business, that people are really yearning to get back together again and to work together, particularly when in certain contexts, when they're problem solving, that kind of thing, being in a room just feels a more rewarding experience. Sorry, Greg.
I was going to say, I think you ever so slightly froze there, Chris, just so you were talking about tech and the need to get together. And then
sorry.
No, not at all. I think
am I back with you now?
You're back in the world, yeah. Hello.
Proving the point that maybe doing everything online is ideal.
That was
so I think that, and the second question was, Greg, sorry, remind me.
Oh, I don't think I can remember it. The second question was about collaborative working is inherently better if you're face to face. Discuss. What do you think?
Personally, I think, yeah, but maybe I've been working for 30 years, so that's how I'm used to working. Perhaps there's a generation coming through now that spend all their time online and have done, Generation Z, who, in a bizarre way, might find actually doing face-to-face more unusual than doing things online. So I don't know. I think what we can definitely say is that things have accelerated. We've probably had 6, 7, 8 years worth of change in the space of 12 months. And I think we're all still figuring out what that means. And what I'm sure it requires is innovation and questioning the assumptions that we've all had. As that we've all had certain assumptions about what work looks like, how work works. And I think if we take any of those for granted, we may well find ourselves the world moving beneath our feet.
Yeah, I was thinking an exact image of the cartoon character running out over the edge of a cliff and suddenly finding there is no more land space behind. For both Hayley and Andy, what are you experiencing? Perhaps you first, Andy. What are you experiencing in terms of companies actually committing to new space, given, as Chris has touched on, you've all touched on, the variables which businesses face at the moment?
Yeah, certainly on a conventional basis, we are busy showing a lot of people around a lot of offices. I'm really pleased to say that the viewings have come back from virtually zero, which were during the middle of the pandemic, and we're getting loads of inquiries as well. There is a hesitancy for people to commit, and I can't blame them. As you said, we don't even know what's going to happen this afternoon with the announcement. And if the Delta variant comes forward and we go into another, may go into another lockdown. So you can understand the hesitancy from people to commit to a long-term lease. But what is positive is people are coming back out. They are looking. And they do want to move things forward. They do want to get back to normality. It's just, unless you're absolutely forced to because you've got a lease event, or you need to, not every company's shrinking. There's quite a lot of people expanding as well, which is quite good to see. And so unless you're forced to, people aren't quite making that decision yet.
And Hayley, for interaction, the first step for some companies at least is the new premises, as Andy's talked about, maybe a hesitancy, a lot of interest, but hesitancy. But then what about how that affects your business in terms of people committing to, radical reinventing of business premises?
Yeah, I'll back up what Andy says in terms of the hesitancy, but I think what businesses are also now doing is they are considering things a lot earlier. So they know something's coming up, the lease event is coming up, whereas before they might have made some kind of quite quick decisions about what to do next. They are now, 18 months before, at least, they're now considering, okay, we've got this in the future, and they're gearing themselves up so they are really ready to make those decisions when the time comes. So I think a lot of people are looking around to see what's on offer, and then really trying to understand how much of that space they need. But what we're actually finding, a lot of companies are discovering once we help them through the process, is that there's many that don't need to downsize as much as they thought they did. You're swapping out desks. So if you're a very desk heavy environment, you're now swapping that out for other types of spaces. So it's not suddenly you're going to shrink by the pure amount of desks. You have to be considering what else that means that you need to provide to make people be able to have a really good day in the office. So there's hesitancy, but once there's an understanding of that, it's becoming a lot easier for them to get their head around. And they've got to keep talking to people, keep trying out, get the hybrid working policy in place. People are still finding out their way, and carry out survey. We can obviously help with that, but I think there's larger businesses, like Andy said, there's some huge growth out there, but this is also where they're still looking for that flexibility. So they'll bring in I think there's opportunity where co-working companies will sit within buildings where they can then take that flexibility with the confidence they can still take a certain amount of space with confidence to grow in the future. So,
yeah. Thanks, Andy. Just back to that point. I mean, with all the how one defines it, the swirl, the uncertainty, hesitancy. Chris's point about the strong latent demand that is there, the desire to be, altogether within cities, etc. Given all the variables, what's happened to pricing currently?
Paradoxically, it's gone up during the pandemic.
Go figure.
Prime rents have actually increased at £38 a foot. Desk rates on the co-working side of things, because there have been a number of new entrants coming in, because the availability is constrained, desk rates have, as we're coming out of, they dropped off obviously during the pandemic. As we're coming out, it's muted that desk rates are going to start increasing as well. So, and that's a supply-demand thing. It's market-led.
Well, I mean, conventionally in business, supply and demand, the interaction between the two, if the demand is greater than supply, price goes up. But I guess we're in the sort of strange hinterland that demand is high, but decision-making is much more contingent. And probably that argues, from what you've said, that if people are on that brink of making a decision, prices are only likely to go up subsequently as the ability to enact or transact takes place this autumn. And I'm not trying to give you a sales pitch, but that strikes me as a likely scenario.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of construction ongoing, but it's mainly the larger end of the market that's being brought forward. They're much bigger buildings. And so that is going to help supply a little bit, but it's not going to make a massive dent on it. Certainly with the levels of demand. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say how perverse that is in a sense, isn't it? Really, that we're talking about a lack of supply when we know that there's vast amounts of underutilized space in the city. If you think what's happening to the retail sector, for example. What's happening to all that space. I mean, I remember in the 2008-2009 crash, about 1 million square foot of probably the lower end kind of office space got taken out of office inventory, largely converted over to things like student accommodation and so on. That wasn't really replaced, and it wasn't really the plush office space. But I had a business that was on the Triangle above Boots. It was fairly rough and ready, paid about £12 a square foot. It was perfect for us. That's now student accommodation. And you imagine you go down to Broadmead, above all these shops, there'll be loads of space that could be fairly quickly converted to office space. What's going to happen to the old Debenhams building, for example? And I do, again, go back to this point about, this really slow moving market, when we've got a city that has the potential to be involved in really fast growth, high tech things, and there's just a disconnect between the two. And I'm not saying it's the fault of the developers; it may be as much the fault of the city council and the planners. But to me, to hear prices going up right now, as someone that's about to go back into the market looking for somewhere for ourselves, is just deeply depressing.
Yeah, just picking up on your point about the Broadmead and Debenhams, it is property being a slow moving animal. There are a number of landlords who are buying space up with the view that they will bring them forward as offices in due course, but it just takes time. There are still leases on some of them. Generally, a retailer would take the ground floor and some of the upper parts, and you've got to sort out the legals of that. And Debenhams itself specifically, I looked at it in some detail as a conversion to offices, and as that building stands at the moment, it was pretty much cost prohibitive. So that probably will come forward with it. Whether it will stay as it is when a new buyer's found for it, I don't know. But it's.
I suppose my point, Andy, is that we can't, as a city. I've always just heard the reasons why we can't do things. And there are other cities all over the world that are competing for these kind of jobs, and we've got to up our game, because other places, I've been to Austin in Texas quite often. Austin's gone from this 2-bit town of basically the university and the city administration, it's the capital of Texas, to now a place that's attracting Facebook and Google. And partly it's they don't have the restrictions because you can just grow and grow, expand into the desert, if you like. I know it's more difficult here, but I really think we've got to up our game, because we will have other cities in Europe, in the Far East, that will take these jobs unless we can. It doesn't take 15 years to convert a building from one use to another. It's just ridiculous.
And also, you say other cities in Europe and elsewhere. There's other cities like Manchester, Brighton, Cambridge, and there are different ways, let alone London. It's slightly paradoxical, because most of the trend has been out of London through, but from what you're saying, words in your mouth, Chris, but are you saying that this is an inhibitor to Bristol's success as a city? Massively words in your mouth, but do you buy that?
Totally, yeah. I think it really is. I think we've got to look at the product we're offering, and as a city, forget our individual businesses. As a city, people are looking and thinking, can Bristol give me what I need as a business that wants to scale and grow? And if the property market is kind of slow, not a lot of choice, expensive, people will go elsewhere. Simple as that.
Well, this is one of the issues you've touched on before from the creative and tech sector, particularly. These tend to be smaller scale businesses that perhaps people haven't heard of beyond BBC and Aardman and so on. Do you think, and this is a bit of a boomerang back to you and BCI, do you think that there is a greater role in lobbying and bringing this issue to the fore? I mean, some of the stuff today has been quite revelatory, that this needs to be much, much higher up the council's agenda and all related bodies' agenda, because if it is an inhibitor to growth for Bristol, this terrific rising reputation, coolest city, multiple growth opportunities, capital of the West, but if that's an inhibitor, something has to change.
Yeah. I mean, we're not really a lobbying organisation. We're here primarily to put Bristol's creative industries on the map and shout about the city nationally and internationally. So it's not necessarily our job, but I mean, I've certainly, Marvin Rees had a hustings before he got re-elected, and I made this point to him. But to be honest, I always feel like everyone says it's too difficult. Everyone says they can't. It's not their problem. It's someone else's. If you talk to developers, it's the city council. If you talk to WECA, it's the developer. Someone, and maybe it is really complicated, but I just don't think it's so difficult that we can't solve it. It's not the most difficult problem in the world. Yeah,
that speaks.
Well, I was just going to say, this for me is almost a reflection of how of a sort of longer term sort of inertia, a tendency to sort of entropy in Bristol with its politics and so on, that maybe is starting to change now. We've got a mayor, but this goes back 20, 30 years. It's why we haven't got a decent public transport system in the city, why other cities have got metros, and it's taken us years to get some kind of bus type thing, and why just lots of things happen too slowly in Bristol. Bristol succeeds kind of despite itself very often, rather than because of the leadership that we've had from those that need to make these kind of decisions.
A couple of observations there. One, creative entropy up to a point is useful. The gap between where you are and where you wish to be is the desire, and it's exactly entrepreneurs who help fill that gap. And the other, it may well be the case, and I don't know, that inside Manchester, Brighton, Cambridge, etc., they have much the same frustrations and debates, even Austin, Texas, who knows? But that doesn't at all diminish the point. There is a very, very strongly felt opportunity, and all the indicators are there's a great latent demand.
Yeah, I think we just need to be ambitious, more ambitious. Yeah, maybe other cities are. I'm sure there's frustrations wherever you go, but unless we're, it would be easy to get complacent about Bristol and think, it's doing well, it's people love coming here, but the other cities, as we've talked about, not just internationally but in this country, want a slice of what we're doing, and unless we up our game across the board, we may not be saying the same things in 10, 15 years time.
Hayley, Andy talked before about the gap between the total percentage of space which is in co-working hubs in Bristol compared with other cities. Strong implication that demand will flow through, particularly given Bristol's tech strength. For you as a business, are those sort of co-working hubs a challenge or a joy because of the cool factor?
As in helping create them, do you mean?
Helping create them and navigating through or helping persuade perhaps slightly more conservative landlords that this is a strongly viable commercial option, provided that the environment itself is of the quality which you're bringing.
I mean, Andy might be able to answer better on how landlords want to accommodate co-working companies, because I know there are some big challenges around that, depending on how they want to, take up leases of certain spaces and what they will offer, because the model has to work for them as well. See, they are charging this space on. So I think there's some challenges for co-working companies, and perhaps Andy could maybe touch on that. There's the co-working has an opportunity now to provide something quite exciting and different. Working with them is slightly different. You're not understanding how much space they want and how they're there to provide, what are they wanting to bring to the market? Who are they? You've still got to attract you have to have a brand, you have to have a culture yourself. Some of these co-working companies will almost act as a head of culture for some businesses, where they're bringing certain events to the business. So there's still that opportunity for them to do something niche and important to themselves to attract the right people. Obviously we want to work with businesses as well, and I think we're finding more that some businesses are shaping what their co-working spaces within co-working are looking like. So predominantly you would just take a desk and use their group areas. Well, now businesses are wanting to take more of a space within a co-working space as their own. So they want their own kitchen, they want their own meeting spaces. It's more about the flexibility. So there's some great opportunity within that as well, if co-working companies will offer that to people.
And thank you. And Andy?
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on what Hayley's just said, and Chris, I hope I can allay some of your fears. The property industry is changing. It is starting to get itself in gear and move much quicker than it has been doing. But I totally appreciate that it is a little way behind where it needs to be. I'd like to think it will hopefully catch up with where it needs to be but it will be over the next couple of years rather than next week, next month. But picking up on Hayley, and this is one of the things that's changing, is picking up on Hayley's point. Historically, co-work and serviced office providers have really struggled to go into office buildings because of the sort of the model that they use in terms of how rent goes back to the landlord. And historically, landlords have primarily pushed back on it unless they had a building that they were struggling with, and in which case a co-work service provider was a bit of a saving grace, because they could offload the problem. But that is pretty much across the board. Most landlords now will accept that business model, or those business models, which will bring things forward, and it will change the industry. And actually, quite a lot of landlords are looking at it and going, rather than trying to do this ourselves, would we not be better to bring a service provider in who knows what they're doing, who operates in this environment all the time? So there's a bit of that happening, but it's happening now. That evolution is coming forward, but it's been coming through for the last pre-pandemic. It had already started to come through. It is coming through. It's sort of put on hold a little bit during the pandemic, but it's starting to pick itself up.
I think, Andy, as well, what you were mentioning earlier, which, like you say about the distillery, landlords are looking at doing things slightly differently as well. Where there's more and more landlords that are looking to offer fitted out space. It's not quite co-working, but it's actually somewhere where we kind of term, plug and play. So it's something ready, set, go. You can walk in a lot quicker. It's fitted out for you, and obviously that's reflected in your lease deal. But I think that's kind of shifted the market as well. You will see a lot more of that
Yeah. Hayley, from your point of view, just perhaps briefly in the moments remaining, just talk us through a little bit about what it's like being a client of Interaction, how you shape what the client wants, how much you're following as opposed to leading, and figuring out how budget structure.
Yeah, I think we really, I suppose, work with companies to, at the moment more so than ever, helping them understand what their hybrid working is going to do for them. Businesses can't just expect to understand straight away how much their office space is going to be used if you're giving lots of choice to your staff. So, what days are people going to come in? Helping them maybe structure that a little bit more with things that we've done, helping them carry out surveys, and interpreting those surveys, because you can ask questions and you'll get a response, and I think sometimes those responses are because of how you've asked them, so we will help interpret those, and then really help businesses understand the shape of space to come, and obviously we do a hell of a lot of research around that to workplaces have evolved continuously. Okay, granted, they've evolved very quickly, but they have continued to move every 5 to 10 years. They completely change year on year on year. So yeah, it's just keeping up with that and guiding people through that. What's important to them, what's their culture, what they need to do, how they're going to expand, and mold that into something that's really going to work for them.
One last, we're coming towards the end of this. I just wanted to pick up on the sort of the more macro point about Bristol as a city, its stock availability and so on. Talk about businesses moving out, at least in part, if not in whole, from London. Can you just talk through or give observations about the part that creativity in workplace design, this is perhaps more for you, Hayley, plays in attracting some of those London companies, separate to Chris's point about the availability of stock in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a war on talent, isn't there? And I think more so now than ever, you will have to create a workplace that suits, that attracts people in, but also it's now also about your flexibility as a business. So if you can get those two things right, you will win that war on talent. So destination workplaces have been talked about for a long time, but it's just moved ever much forward than that. And now it's all about, obviously, the flexibility as well that you can provide. But I think you have to do what's right for your business as well. I don't think it can be, it's very people-centric at the moment. It's very much about what the teams want to do. But you have to balance that with what's going to work so that your business will survive as well. So if you can get all of those bits right, you will win that war on talent.
The war on talent, the war on availability, also the war on time. We're right at the end of this. I think this has been fascinating. I'm trying to imagine what this conversation might sound like in 6 months' time, let alone 18 months' time, where there are multiple uncertainties in the very near term, including, as Andy said, come 6 o'clock today. We'll all learn more about the immediate timescale. But the logic has to be there that with Bristol's tremendous propulsive growth over the particularly last decade or so, its reputation, the macro issues to do with retail space, the desire to get companies from other cities here, et cetera, there has to be more flexibility. And there has to be, brilliant opportunities, I would have thought, on the face of it, for a company like Interaction who can reimagine existing premises in a creative way. Don't know, any last thoughts from any of our panelists on these topics? Or not? Or are we done?
I'm just going to say, it took, I don't know how many years did it take to demolish the Royal Mail sorting building next to Temple Meads. Yeah. We've now got a sort of, a level field there, and it's a bit of a, for me, a bit of a litmus test for Bristol. Hopefully that area is an opportunity for things to move forward. And I'm kind of encouraged by what Hayley and Andy have said about how they're going to respond to the market, and there's new things coming, and that would be great. And maybe we all need to work a little bit more in partnership together, both as the different parts of the economy in the city, to make sure we've got the right the right setup for what we need going forward.
Yeah. Ready for you?
Yeah, just it is an evolving, ever evolving, market. I think Bristol is going to continue to to push on through this time and capitalise on the creative tech sector, and the collaboration and the co-work market that is coming through. I just think we're very well positioned for it, and you can see that with the levels of inquiry that we're getting through the door on a day-to-day basis now. So yeah, hopefully that trend will continue upwards, and fingers crossed we can build enough stock to accommodate it in time.
So not to traipse into football analogies, but the Bristol is going to win. The only question is how big it wins and how soon it wins. Actually, it's a rubbish analogy. Hayley, your last thoughts. It better be better than mine just then.
I think it's exciting times ahead. Like Andy said, there's a lot of change coming. There's a lot that businesses will be seeing what other businesses are doing, and offices are gonna be even more exciting places to be. It's exciting times.
That's what we're all trying to figure out is how to make offices places people want to go to and thrive in. And the older certainties of the traditional serried ranks of desks and the 9 to 5, those certainties have gone, and we're all figuring out what it's going to be replaced by. I've personally found this fascinating, both I'm thinking about our business and what we're seeking to do with Media Clash, but I'm sure many other businesses will take value from this, and we will promote it also through our YouTube channel. I think this conversation will continue. But for now, thank you to our business surgery sponsor today, Interaction, and to Hayley, and to our special guests, Chris Thurling of Bristol Creative Industries and Armadillo, and Andy Smith of Knight Frank. Again, thank you for those watching today and your time on this here and on YouTube. Please look out for EntreConf, our major new conference for entrepreneurs on July 1st. The future is unwritten. From Bristol Life, good luck to you all in the coming months. This has been a Media Clash production. This has been our latest Bristol Life Business Surgery. Thank you. Bristol together, always. Thanks.